afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Propy weekly webinar. This is episode 138, and today we will be discussing the biggest challenges of 2022 in the title industry. And today our guests are Kim Whitlock and Susan Stewart. Kim Whitlock is a longtime friend and colleague. She has been in the title industry for many, many years. Kim, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. Like Anna said, my name is Kim Whitlock. I'm currently with Westcor, and I have been in the industry for about 15 years. I started as an examiner at a small independent agent and just kind of worked my way up into working with underwriters and working directly with agents. And now I'm with Westcor, who is an underwriter, if you're not familiar, setting up their production center here in Colorado. I'm excited.
Very awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And for those of you who do not know Susan Stewart, known Susan for many, many years also. She is our current underwriter with First National Title Insurance, and she's amazing. Susan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Right. Hello, I'm happy to be here. Like she said, I'm Susan Stewart. I've been in the title industry for about 22 years, both on the agency side and in underwriting for the last 5 years. So I get to work directly with the title agencies, such as Anna, and Propy. So excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's just dive in. I'd like to discuss some challenges that we've hit, in 2022, and maybe you guys can chime in and tell us and everybody that's watching today and in the future about what our challenges might have been in what it is that we do personally. So for me, I think one of the largest challenges, we talk a lot about wire fraud and how wires get, stolen by the fraudsters, and that's incoming money from, a buyer. But we don't really talk about how title agencies are also victims of title fraud when sending payoffs out. I know of, 3 people this year that has happened to, not people, but companies. And it's awful because, what the fraudsters do is they steal or they capture, intercept those wire instructions to a particular payoff, and they add in their own wire instructions. And they say, here, please use this payoff. And if the escrow officer is not, carefully watching, they can send out funds that don't belong to that fraudster. So that's happened 3 times this year in 2022. I know that has to do with escrow and not necessarily title, but title companies are affected by that. What are your thoughts, Susan?
Well, I'm out in the field a lot visiting different agencies, and it's been quite a whirlwind this year with a very, very busy competitive market at the beginning of the year. And now it's just slowed incredibly the last half of the year to a more stable, normal market. But people are scrambling to get used to that new market. So I hear a lot about agencies wanting to know how to make their marketing better, how to get out in front of realtors and lenders, and just really how to be more connected and getting their exposure out there. So most of my agents talk a lot about that right now, and dealing with, downsizing or anything like that.
How about you, Kim?
Yeah, and just to piggyback really off of what both of you said, and I didn't mention it in my intro, but before I started at Westcor, I was most recently at an independent agent here in Colorado. And I think a big piece of it is the slow market, just like Susan said. So we're all struggling with staffing, right? We needed to let go of a lot of people, which means that we're putting a lot more tasks and responsibilities on those team members we have left. And with that comes, people are really busy and rushing, and they're also learning new tasks, and new procedures. So that's when these fraudsters really have that opportunity to come in and try to trick us, really, because we don't have that staff who's, been with us for a long time learning those procedures. So I think for me, the biggest challenge this year has been staffing. Just because the volume has been so low, it's really difficult to keep enough good people on staff.
Yeah, that's a challenge as well. And it's unfortunate that when, we go down in the market, and I still think though that houses are selling, we're never going to be out of the market.
Sure.
There's always going to be a need for a title company in the industry. We're always going to need title insurance, right? So I think that, yeah, there's a huge slowdown, but if you think about, years past, and where we are today, we went way up very quickly, right? And so now we're coming back down because the rates went up. This time of year usually slows down. There's nothing different, in terms of the slowdown this time of year. I think it was a lot higher before, but this is when we buckle down and we start integrating our systems, our procedures, capping back on, filling in the blanks of where we left off before and where did we dip, where did we grow. Education is huge right now because we need to educate one another on what it is that we need to do, what worked, lessons learned, where were our failures, where were our successes. And so Kim, in your area, tell me about some of the issues that you had in the title side and the production piece of what it is that you do.
Absolutely. So, just like I said with staffing, it's been really hard. So, I lost my examiner earlier in the year, and just with that volume, it's really hard to get those people back in the door. So we've, I hate to use the term resorted to, but we have then, reached out to our underwriter partners who are able to then help us with that production. And I think it's the perfect, just like you said, this is a normal slowdown this time of year. And it's the perfect time to just dive into those new opportunities and those new processes and get your team up to speed while you have that time and it's not that busy middle of the year rush. So for sure, I think reaching out to your underwriters and see what tools they have to support you in this market is a really good idea.
Right. And with working with First National Title and Susan personally, Propy Title has been able to speak with, they're very available to us when we need to speak about things, new things coming about, new technology, blockchain, cryptocurrency. They're very blockchain and high tech oriented. And this is one of the reasons why we stick with them. There's not very many underwriters that are pro blockchain. And, they really see what is coming in the future and where we're going. Now, I understand, and everybody, the majority of people in our industry always ask, okay, you're moving forward. Okay, that's wonderful. What about going back? Like, okay, so yes, First National Title does allow us to record on blockchain, and that's moving toward the future. I remember when I worked back in, gosh, I'd say 15 years ago, and we had a title plant in New Mexico. And, that's called the land of mañana, right? And I remember walking in and I'm like, what is this? And there were piles and piles and shelves and shelves and shelves of documents, all paper, all microfiche, like so much data. And we had to go through a long, strong effort of getting all these documents scanned in and ensuring that, they were preserved accurately and all the data was shown. And it took so many man hours to do that. But that's where we are today, right? So we're in a paperless environment where, it allows us now for the majority of us, like Propy, we're 100% work from home. Everyone is remote. We have people in Europe. We have people throughout the United States that work for the company, and we all work remotely. If we didn't move all that data to where we can get it, digitally, where would we be today, right? It would be impossible to have that data. So tell me what your thoughts are about moving forward and how important you think blockchain might be to the future of our industry.
Well, I'll start. I personally think it's huge. We've seen it with things as it's changed to Ron and mobile closings and all of that as it's progressed. It's just going to make life a lot easier and a lot more streamlined and a lot safer also from the fraud. But I look at this time right now as, yeah, we say it's a slowdown, but it's really not. The prices of houses really aren't going down too much. They're staying pretty stable. And in a market like this, I think it's a perfect opportunity, especially with all the digital and all the tech that we have already in place, to really stand out as a title agency, to really use your marketing resources as well as your technology and share that. Start sharing it, start sharing your story. And there's so many avenues that you could do that through social media and through so many ways where you can get your voice and your brand out there. I know a lot of companies that started their companies in 08, 09 when we had the recession, and they're still operational today. So I look at this time as a time to where the star agencies are going to start to shine, and those, partners are going to be able to see that and gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Kim?
I agree with Susan that this is the perfect time to start getting your team educated on things like blockchain and crypto, right? And just like you said, Susan, I think we were all, when Ron first came out, we were all a little bit hesitant and curious, like, how is it going to work? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? And I think it's just the fear of the unknown, which is what I've been really impressed with you guys at Propy, is your ability to get out there in front of people and explain it to us in a way that we can all understand and get behind. And I think that's just really important. I think it is the way of the future. And I think people like you, Anna, and Propy are going to be leading the way and helping the rest of us get on board.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And it really is important, because when you talk about blockchain and the security and transparency that it holds, yes, we have all that. But then, title insurances are, most underwriters are like, okay, well, then are you trying to push, title out? Absolutely not. We're going to always need title, just like now. A consumer could not come in, unless they knew how to do it, go and complete a search on their own, right? I don't believe that a consumer can go in and just say, not knowing the business. And there's a lot of people out there that do not know our business. I remember when I bought my first house, that was in 1998. I had no earthly idea what I was signing, what I was doing, what does land mean? What does title mean? What are these fees? Okay, I guess I just have to pay them, and I just trusted in my mortgage lender and the title agency to do what it was that was needed to be done. And I think that's where the majority of our consumers are. So they trust in the education of their realtors, and they trust in title and escrow companies to make sure that the transaction closes properly. So back to the point of a consumer doing their own search on blockchain to see where those records are and see if, what liens or encumbrances on there, I don't believe that they would be able to do it on their own. They're still going to need an examiner. They're still going to need, that search from title. We're going to need underwriters, because agents like us, we're going to need those underwriters who are going to entrust in us. So blockchain, yes, is the way of the future, but adds in so much more protection, never getting away from our underwriters and the need for title. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I personally, I agree with you. And it's not just the search, you touched on it, it's an exam, right? We can all access the county records, most counties, especially here in our state of Colorado. But it's more about examining, right? A title policy covers a lot. What about fraud and forgery and your survey lines? There's a lot that goes into it. For a regular off the street consumer, it's just too much for them to dive in and really understand. But I think you also have a good point. I think people are worried about being replaced in this business a lot. And I just see blockchain as an added, just an added tool in their tool belt. Just like something like production, like I build with West Corin, which Susan's company FNTI offers. We're not out here trying to replace the humans, right? And our examiners in this business. We're just trying to provide a tool to the agents out there who we know are struggling with these things. Wire fraud, lack of employees, all those things can be addressed with things like blockchain and RON and all of that.
Yes, good points. How about you, Susan?
No, I agree. I think that there's so much misconception of title insurance still with consumers and with realtors that we are kind of the middle spoke of the wheel that keeps the whole transaction together. And you're going to always need someone that is going to need to examine it. You're going to have to make sure that all the liens are paid. I mean, there's a lot into it that people don't realize because they don't understand the whole process of title. And there's risk that comes along with that. So you have to have a strong underwriter that, you know, has the protections in place as well that can support you. So consumers aren't going to, it's going to be a long time before that, you know, we see any type of change in that direction for sure.
And just to add to that real quick, you know, when I got into title at first, I was excited. Everything was black and white, right? You know, this is the right way to do things. This is the wrong way to do things. But what I've learned over the years is there's a lot of gray, and it really is about risk management and assessing that risk. And that's why you need the title company and you need that strong underwriter to help you take a look at that risk and see. And that's for the benefit of the consumer, really. And we're, you know, an uninterested third party who can help you evaluate that risk and get you those coverages that you need for the biggest purchase of your life.
Right, exactly. But let's talk about that risk, okay? Because, you know, there's may not be a lot of people out there that understand what the true risk is. So let's dive into title a little bit. So where you talk about examination, yeah, there's a search, and you're right, you can get that in public records. Not every county will allow it, but there are a lot of counties that, you know, it's public record and you can gain that data, but you'll never really be able to know how it is that you're going. I mean, Kimberly, I've worked with you for many, many years, and you were a lot of times my go-to person to say, hey, I don't understand this. Help me out. This one is really, really difficult. I've not run into this before. And so, you know, you are very, very just talented in knowing, oh, this is why. And you know, you would dive in a little bit deeper to dig in. Tell the audience about, you know, maybe one of the struggles that you had found or encountered just in 2022.
In 2022, okay. So I'll say, you know, one of the other struggles that we've had this year, at least at the independent agency I was at before Westcor, is we're getting a lot more commercial deals, which are more involved, and we're also getting some of those more difficult deals. You know, we had one recently where there was a party to the transaction, a husband and wife, and the husband had passed away. And there were some heirs who were surfacing, claiming their rights to the property, even though they didn't legally have them. These are things that you really need to look at and say, okay, even though in this example, this heir, this daughter, doesn't have a legal right to the property, they can still open a claim with that underwriter, which would affect the buyer, right? So again, it's not black and white. That's a gray area that you really need to analyze and examine and determine what's the best way forward that we can mitigate that risk, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
it's huge because what is that risk? Explain what that risk is.
Sure. In this particular transaction, that daughter was claiming that she had interest because her father was on the property with his wife. Now they were on as joint tenants, right? Which, you know, means if one party passes away, their interest passes to the other party on title. But she was claiming it was her interest. So the risk there is that that buyer then purchases the home, and this daughter then tries to gets an attorney, opens a claim with the underwriter claiming that she then had rights in that property. And even though I fully, truly believe that her claim would fail, it still is going to be a hassle for that homeowner, right? For years to come, possibly while it's tied up in litigation. If they want to get a mortgage, if they want to then decide to sell their house within that time, they're going to be stuck because this, you know, person came in there. So what we did was, you know, we spoke with her, we took a look at it together. We advised her to speak with a real estate attorney and understand her rights. And ultimately, our underwriter, which was Westcor, advised that we needed a quitclaim deed from that party to the new owner, which we were able to do. and it was no problem. And now if she ever tries to come back and claim that she has interest, we have that document in public record saying that she signed away her potential rights to it. And now that buyer is protected.
Yeah, and how long did that take?
We were pretty lucky in this case. It only took a couple weeks. But we all know sometimes, especially when you're dealing with disgruntled family members, it can take months, and it's a lot of work for the title agent to try to deal with, you know, those different personalities and those relationships. And, you know, we as title agents, we always say we are not attorneys and we don't practice law. So it's a fine line of helping people understand their rights, but without giving legal advice, if you will.
Right, and that's in the state of Colorado. I mean, there are other states like, you know, Florida, there's attorneys there that you've got attorneys on staff, and, you know, they're there to help with those kinds of situations as well. But Susan, tell on an underwriter's perspective, you know, we run into a great deal of risks, and those risks include, you know, any kind of claim that might come about. And I know your organization has a plethora of attorneys on staff to help agents like us get through what Kim just described. What are any of the challenges that you had witnessed in 2022 in title?
When it comes to risk, I would say just with the changing market and the lowering of staff, like Kim was referring to, a lot of agencies have started to get more creative and try to grow their business on the builder side, because like in the West, in Colorado and Utah and Arizona, there's still so much new build going on. So they've kind of, you know, changed up their mix of business a little bit more with focusing on commercial and builder transactions. Well, along with that comes of just a bigger risk, because when you go to these new builds and these commercial, you know, the claims can be significant. If there is a transfer of property because, you know, interest rates are going up and loans and things like that are changing, that if you miss a loan when you're paying off, if an agency misses a loan, that could be a potential huge claim. And we did just get one of those recently. So as an underwriter, it's valuable to have a good underwriter with good underwriting staff. So Propy, for example, has an underwriter that's just for them. We have, I want to say maybe 15 or 20 underwriters across the country, and they cover certain areas. So your underwriter covers your Western states, but if you have a question or you have something weird that comes up on title or something in a transaction, you can always go to that attorney and get advice on how to move forward with it. So that protects you as well. And I think that's a huge advantage for agents to understand. Sometimes it takes them a little bit to understand that. But yeah, I would say with the changing shifts and everything this year, that's probably the most I've seen, is things falling through the cracks or people trying to shift their business. And so when that happens, it's easier to make mistakes and it's easier to see claims come from that. So
I agree.
Right. That's true. And, you know, I think that, you know, the more staff that we have, it opens it up a little bit wider for human error, because, you know, I know as we were growing and as we were moving forward, you know, I've been in the industry for 24 years, and throughout this time, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't let go of this, or I can't let go of that, because I was so worried about the risk and so worried about, oh my gosh, if this escrow officer isn't going to pay attention to this could happen. Or if I don't have, you know, all my ducks in a row, this could happen. And if I'm not examining every single file that comes in, this could happen. So when we train and we trust and we educate the staff that we bring on board, and then at a time like this, I'm going to get back to our staff. At a time like this, we end up having to, you know, make the difficult decision to let some people go because we just don't have the resources to keep them on, right? So have there been any issues from either one of you that you know of this last year where, you know, employment cuts have really caused any kind of stress or strain in your personal world?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you personally, you know, last year when I was at the independent agency, last year we were doing hundreds of files a month. And this year we went down pretty significantly to 40, 50 on average. So you can imagine the type of staffing reduction we had to do. And that puts a lot of pressure on those good employees that you've retained. And it's stressful for them. They're trying to do their job well. They're having more responsibility pushed on them. They don't necessarily know why they're doing which piece because they've been focused on one department for so long. So for me, it was a struggle, but it was also actually very rewarding to be able to really sit down and train those good employees and help them learn more about our business. And I think now that I'm at an underwriter and Susan at your underwriter, I think it's, again, really important to lean on your underwriters for that, even for staff training. That's something we do here at Westcor. We'll come into your office and we'll train your staff for you on wire fraud and how to read a rate manual, how to things like that, which is very important and takes some of that pressure off of you, maybe as a manager, to help those employees feel more comfortable.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one thing to add on to that, of what you said, Kim, is one thing I've noticed since it's gone down a little bit slower, but the stress of change and all that is I've gone and I've talked with my agents about where they can make sure that they're protected correctly and make sure where they can maybe save some money through their banking relationships or, your underwriter has a lot of resources and oftentimes agents don't know that. Another thing, I was in a meeting just yesterday and this fairly large agency was going over their E&O insurance and their cyber crime insurance, and often you are not covered adequately enough. And I was amazed just being there with my agent, listening to them talk about their E&O and all of that. So I try to be a resource to my agents to help them find these resources that will help them, just like Kim said, how to read a rate manual, how to train employees, but also making sure that you're covered properly, especially with the cybercrime and the tech area that can be scary and people who, fraud has come into place. So making sure you're protected, but you're also paying the right prices for what you're getting, so.
Which is huge too, yeah.
Yeah. And so I've been doing that a lot with my agents and they've been reevaluating all of those pieces and it's helping them quite a bit.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's a great point about E&O, because I don't think there's a lot of people that understand that E&O is huge. It's something that, it's not just regulated. Like, my underwriter requires a certain amount that we have to be covered by. And I know that every other underwriter out there has to, they've got their parameters and their guidelines themselves, but the states themselves also have their parameters in ensuring that title companies are covered to where they need to be and that they have a good underwriter behind them so that, in the event that, a title agency collapses or goes into bankruptcy or, that underwriter is going to back that agent, because there's not a whole lot of people that understand that. The insurer is who takes ultimately the risk, because if I went away tomorrow, and this will never happen, Propy is here to stay, but if Propy collapsed at some point, everything that we have, all of our records, all of everything is now our underwriter's responsibility. They have to then go in and take care of that. So when we talk about title insurance, that is where that comes in too. An agency is trusted. An agency is, you have to prove that you know what it is that you're doing and that you're going to ultimately take care of the consumer. And so I think I'm going to, dive back into blockchain and add on to how important securing data, not just for title, but securing data for the consumer and how important blockchain is because of the security. So if you have, I don't know if any of you have struggled with anybody in deed fraud. Have either of you met anybody or know any agency that had a consumer where they were a victim of deed fraud?
I actually haven't dealt with it personally. Since I've been in the business long enough, I have dealt with other agents who have had deed fraud or someone calling the company just to ask about deed fraud because they're concerned about it, which is really good that that information is now out there for people to at least be aware of.
Yeah, right. How about you, Susan?
I have not myself personally. I've seen a lot of other fraud, and wire fraud's been the big one that I've seen. So, but I know it's out there, and I know there is obviously risk there, but as long as you're mitigating that and you have the right proper channels and partnerships in place, then you should be okay.
Which
That's
ties
why
back
it's
to
so
what we were
important.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say it ties back to what we were saying earlier with the examining, right? You know, you can do that search, but there's a lot that goes into examining, analyzing those notary acknowledgements, checking those signatures against other documents, you know? And there's things that people don't know, like just because a property can be free and clear and you think, okay, well, all I have is this deed to compare a signature on. No, you can go back and you can look at a release deed of trust and compare those signatures. There's things like that that are really important to try to mitigate that risk of that fraud.
Yes, and you know, I met one person who was a victim of title fraud. And it was interesting that, you know, to me, I thought, well, you know, just take your deed down and show, you know, evidence that this property belongs to you, take the search. It wasn't that easy. They had to hire an attorney. So they had, you know, they had to pay out of pocket for that attorney to prove that that was actually their property. So, you know, they had a title agency that helped them out to give them the search and show them, you know, just exactly what you were talking about. But they still had to pay an attorney to represent them. And the hassle, can you imagine not being able to sleep at night? And what had happened was what they did is the fraudster had posed as the homeowner. The loan that they got was now a lien on title. So that lender was responsible for giving that loan to the fraudster, right? So it all happened simultaneously with their own refinance. And that's how the fraudster got in. So two loans at the same time go in, now two liens. They didn't even know about it until they started receiving, you know, in the address in the mail. Why aren't you paying this? You know, collecting debt now, right? So they didn't even know that they had this other lien on title until they got a foreclosure document in the mail.
Yeah.
And that's when, you know, can you imagine the stress of that individual, of them not being able to sleep at night and wondering what it is that they're going to do? They can't place a claim, right? They can't come in and say, okay, you know, Mr. Underwriter, you didn't do your job. So, you know, there's really no recourse except for them to have somebody to help them. Mm-hmm. Like who will help them? I would say I would help them. And I know that both of you would too. But I just can't imagine, you know, somebody doing that. And those are the kind of risks that we are involved in these days with new technology, fraudsters getting smarter, and the protection that we have to have now. I know our platform, being on blockchain, has been very, very great for the security of all of our data, to include wire instructions. We don't even send our wire instructions out anymore. People are invited in as a participant to see what that is, and only the buyer can see it. But I know a great deal of agents out there, they'll walk, you know, they'll physically take that document to their buyer to say, here, use this, and call, instead of, you know, they just don't want those instructions over any kind of media. So I get it. Have you guys run into any of those kinds of problems?
Yeah.
I actually,
Oh,
I have one too. I have an example too, which is a little bit different than yours, Anna, but the other area where you have to really be careful is in trust. So let's say you have this couple that got remarried and there's estranged children or whatever. If they go and get a refi on their house, this new couple, and when you get a refi with the trust, it comes out of the trust to do the refi and then it goes back in. Well, what if that doesn't get done. That happened to me.
Oh,
When
wow.
and then my father passed away, and the house that was deeded, in the trust for his children was not put back in the trust when they did the
Wow.
refi. And so because I'm in title, I was able to catch that. But that's another area where if the financial advisor that put everything together, or if the lender, I mean, there's so many areas where people can either make a mistake unintentionally or on purpose and cause a whole, family to lose their entire trust.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
To piggyback on that a little bit, that's a really good point, Susan. So we say, that we can't practice law, but we see it every day where lenders are advising their clients to deed a property out of their name into a different name. In your example, Susan, from a trust into an individual, because some lenders will, loan on an entity or a trust, for example, but it's more difficult, right? So they're going to try to shortcut it and have you deed into your individual name. And they don't know enough to be able to advise the client on the consequences of that, right? There's a few things. When you purchased your home, that is how your owner's policy, that's the name your owner's policy is in. So if you purchased your house in a trust, the trust is covered by that owner's policy. If you purchased it as an individual on that deed, your owner's policy covers you as an individual. So it's really important to reach out to your title company and ask about the risks and the consequences of just deeding in and out kind of willy-nilly, and then making sure, like in Susan's case, that if you do truly decide to deed out of that entity, that you make sure it gets done and gets put back. But again, sometimes lenders, you read those deeds of trust, that's enough to call a note due, just transferring from an individual's name to an entity back to an entity. So there's a lot of moving parts that you really
Yes,
should.
gosh, so very important. What a great topic, right? We're at the bottom of our hour, so if there aren't any questions, I don't see any in the chat. I think we're going to close up now, and thank you both very, very much for your time and your knowledge. I depend on you both. Like, I'm so glad I know you, because I have several layers of information and people that I can go to, and our network is just going to continue to grow. And I value what it is that you both bring to the table. Of course, the knowledge from both sides. And as underwriters now, I know, Kim, you're with an underwriter, and that's wonderful. They got a great individual. Hopefully they realize that, and they don't want to let you go. And so thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you on our next meeting.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Have a
Bye,
great day.
everyone.
Bye-bye.